week into the fall season. It is the last show that we're going to have in October as we get set up for November. It's about to be Halloween. Turkey season is right around the corner, and your Pitt football Panthers are 7-0, undefeated, with their chance to beat a ranked team while being ranked. That has not happened since Pitt took down Wake Forest in the ACC championship game back in the Kenny Pickett fake slide game. So, lots of excitement here. We got a lot of questions here. And Steven, we're going to start off with a bang because we had a banger question that's really at the top of a lot of people's questions when they came out and they saw those rankings on Saturday. Pitt shellacked Syracuse by 4 touchdowns, 28 points, 41-13. They were a 5-1 Syracuse team. Kyle McCord was supposed to be coming to town to tear Pitt a new one, and Pitt whooped his butt good. And they moved up one spot to 18th. And people are wondering, like Molly here, why isn't Pitt ranked higher than 18th in the AP poll? They're 7-0, and there are so many teams ahead of them with at least 1 loss, and some teams have 2. You should put 2 in capital letters to get the point home. But Molly asks an interesting question that I think a lot of Pitt fans are asking. Steven, can you break down to us why it's happening? And I'll even add my own follow-up. Should it be happening in your eyes as an objective college football observer?
Yeah, why is it happening? Seems pretty obvious. Obviously, there is clearly still not a high level of respect for the rest of the teams in the ACC, specifically the teams that Pitt has beaten. But, Pitt hasn't really, I think, done much to prove that they should be dramatically higher than where they are right now, just kind of in a vacuum on its own. So, beating West Virginia, stacking these wins is certainly impressive, but you look at the level of competition. I mean, West Virginia is, I think, now 2 games above 500. Cincinnati's putting together a nice season. That's all well and good. But, Cal and North Carolina are not necessarily world beaters as far as the ACC goes. And even Syracuse, who Pitt beat last week, I mean, it was kind of a double-edged sword beating them by that much. Honestly, I think if Pitt had maybe beaten Syracuse by less, like people would have still viewed Syracuse as a stronger team than they actually are. Maybe would have thought, another close loss to a ranked opponent. Maybe people view Syracuse more favorably after a closer loss, and by extension, maybe Pitt more as well. Honestly, I think blowing out Syracuse didn't help Pitt at all. So I think they comparatively made Syracuse look pretty bad. And, I think they're maybe deserving of a ranking a few spots higher than this. I was surprised they only moved up 1 spot, but you look at some of the names that are ahead of them. Do you think that they should be ahead of Kansas State or LSU or Boise State or Alabama or Indiana? I mean, those are the teams that are kind of in the range right now. You didn't get a ton of movement at the very, very top of the rankings, not as much as we've seen over the past few weeks or the few weeks prior to week 9. So it was the confluence of a lot of things, but the reality is that Pitt's schedule is not super strong this year. Even if you add in games against ranked opponents like SMU and like Clemson, I mean, Louisville dropping the way they had over the past few weeks hasn't helped at all. And the schedule still just isn't very strong. And the best Pitt can do is keep stacking these wins because they're not going to have many opportunities to land marquee wins over the course of this year.
Yeah, getting a ranked win this week would go a long way, I think. Beating Clemson later on and also staying if they can be undefeated and beat Clemson, I think that will change. That will do enough to change the narrative there as far as how things should be looking in that situation. Looking at how things have played out, there are 7 teams ahead of them. 11 of them have at least lost 1 game. 2 of them have lost 2 games. You mentioned the lack of respect for the ACC. Steven, the ACC's top team wasn't respected last year. Let's not forget Florida State was undefeated, conference champion, and didn't even get an invite to play in the college football playoffs. And that, I think that was a big shock to a lot of people in the ACC. I was like, well, wait a second. Like, if everyone's supposed to have a shot, what's the point of this in the first place? And they were the only. They're going to be the only ever college football team to win their conference, their Power 5 conference, be undefeated, and not get a chance to play in the college football playoff with the way that things have expanded now. And I think that's the bed that Pitt's in right now. And I think that's what a lot of Pitt fans have to understand. You and I have talked about this, and I wrote about this extensively on the basketball side of things. Look at what Pitt basketball went through. They had a 22-win season in every other major conference in college basketball. If you get 21 wins, you're in the last 5 years, you're in no matter what. No matter what your non-conference schedule was, no matter all these other things, 21 wins, you're in. In the ACC, you need basically 23 wins to get in. And that is a lot to achieve, comparatively to other teams when their bubble teams are getting in and yours aren't. And I think that's what Pitt's going to have to overcome in football as well. They have Pat Narduzzi said at the beginning of the season, prove it. And I think that that wasn't just about proving that you're not the 3-9 season. It's about proving it every single week. And I think I've heard the right tone out of him and the right tone out of the players whenever we've tried to ask them and see are they looking at the rankings? Are they when they're getting in the locker room? Are they worried about where are we going to be ranked? And it seems like a general resounding no. Like they acknowledge it. Like we see it, but like that's not going to have any bearing on whether or not you'll beat your next opponent. So. Right now, their course, go in, beat SMU and the Mustangs, beat them in their house. If they do that, they'd be 8-0. They'll have a win over a ranked opponent. They'll have some decent wins. Cincinnati, I think, is a good win. They have good wins, but I think that the key to this is you got to keep stacking them because people just don't believe you. When they don't believe in you, you got to keep proving them wrong.
Yeah, and if they are able to beat SMU this weekend, I think you'll start to see maybe a level setting in that respect. I think Pitt will have a chance to maybe move up into that top 15 range, possibly because they would have one of the more impressive wins of the weekend overall. I mean, Alabama's got to play LSU, and there are a couple other bigger games going into Week 10. But not a ton of ranked on ranked matchups. I think it's just Pitt and Pitt and SMU, and then Penn State and Ohio State. So not a ton of chances for other teams to move up a ton this week. This could be a week where Pitt takes advantage. And the other side of this too is, and Pat Narduzzi said this today, if they just keep winning, everything's going to take care of itself. There is unimpeachable criteria for Pitt to not just make the ACC championship game, but even make the college football playoff too. So it's not like if Pitt, continues to win all of their games that they will be left out of a chance to play for a national championship. I get it on the margins, things might not look great for Pitt, but that is kind of the cost benefit of having a weak schedule is better chances to beat everyone, but also, if you don't beat everyone, then you kind of leave yourself on the outside looking in, you leave yourself open to criticism.
Agreed. And right now, Pitt is in the conference that does not give them that much room to do that. They've got to handle their business, including this ranked win. A ranked win over SMU would go a long way towards that journey. We got other questions here we'll get to. And this one's kind of pertinent towards what we heard from Pat Narduzzi on Monday, because at Pat Narduzzi's press conference, he acknowledged that when we asked about Eli Holstein's health, he didn't just automatically say, "Oh yeah, he's fine. He'll be able to play." Kind of acknowledge there's some stuff going on that Nate Yarnell might be taking a few QB1 reps. Not that Nate Yarnell doesn't take QB1 reps during the week, because he does, but it wasn't a very clear and firm. Oh no, Eli Holstein's playing. Which if you know Pat Narduzzi, when he's doing that, there's a chance that there's a chance that Eli Holstein can be concussed right now, and he could be be in trouble and have all these problems, and he's going through it, or it's also equally possible that he's perfectly fine and Pat Narduzzi's just doing this to mess with people. And because of that, we have that question. This is very timely from Len, who hit us up, said, while it would certainly drive paranoid Pat absolutely bonkers, should the NCAA institute the kind of mandatory injury reporting system that the NFL employs? Now, Stephen, as journalists, we automatically say, yeah, because that makes our lives so much easier. We're not sitting there at the start of each game with our binoculars looking like, okay, is 76 of it? Okay, is he there? Is he there? And then we're doing all this checking to see who's playing. But at the same time, that is a lot to do. It's not like there's only 53 guys in the NFL. There's over 100, some teams have 120 players that you got to account for, and that's a lot to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're exactly right. You and I would be all over a mandatory injury reporting system. And, we even talked to Pat Narduzzi about this, I think a couple of years ago when, I believe the Big Ten was maybe the first to come out with something like this. And we asked Pat Narduzzi about it. And, he said the SEC also came out with this week. And, he said that he preferred to not have a mandatory injury reporting system. He believes keeping injuries under wraps keeps gamblers away from his players, which the logic of that is a little hard to follow. I believe if you report these injuries right away and leave nothing to the imagination, then no one has any reason, gamblers especially, to be hitting up your players asking for inside information.
Right.
But, Narduzzi's given us a million different reasons why he doesn't like to report injuries. And I think it all just comes down to simple gamesmanship. He just doesn't want to give his opponent an edge. So I would be totally in favor of this. I think it would make coaches' lives a lot easier. If they implemented this, quite honestly, you wouldn't have to kind of dodge questions about things all week. But the NCAA is really in no position to implement anything like this. I think he'd be up to the conferences, and I think you have enough paranoid coaches in this league, not just Pat Narduzzi, even though he kind of gets credit for being one, that they would kind of veto this or shut it down. I think also, Narduzzi did point out this year when we asked him about the SEC's injury reporting system that there's a lot of lying that goes on these injury reports. They're maybe not always totally truthful. So I would love it. I don't think Pat Narduzzi would love it. And I don't think a lot of the other coaches in college football would love it either.
And there you have it. That's why I don't think it's ever going to happen, because the coaches will not get behind it. The only way it happens if the league comes down and says it's happening, get over it. But as I agree with you, I find it unlikely that happens. We move on to this question from Doug. He says, I didn't look up the exact numbers, but it seems like the last two games, talking about Pitt football, have been atrocious on third downs. What's the cure in your opinions? And when I did look up the exact numbers, Doug is exactly right. Against Cal, Pitt was 1 of 11 on third downs on offense. Against Syracuse, 2 of 9. That is a collective 3 of 20 on third downs in 2 weeks. And they won those games. That's the other crazy part of this. The cure, if I was to say what the cure is, it's Eli Holstein seeing the field. There's guys open almost every play in Kade Bell's offense, and he's just he's looking the wrong direction, not understanding where to go, and that comes with young players. But I think the cure is get on time, get him to understand where he's got to go with the football. And I think that's a big key there. What's a cure for the third down problems that Pitt's had?
Yeah, I think for starters, against Syracuse, the average distance to the line to gain on third downs was something like 6.5 yards for Pitt, which is just not sustainable. You're not making it easy on your offense if you are not staying on schedule and not getting to manageable third downs, which I think was a huge problem, especially against Syracuse. A lot of I think still some of what we saw maybe against Cincinnati and in the first half, and Cal too, where Eli Holstein was maybe hunting big plays as opposed to taking what was available for him.
Not right there.
No, I know you noticed that a ton. But if Holstein's able to make the more simple reads, if the offensive line is able to run block a little bit better, create some holes for Desmond Reed, then I think Pitt's able to get to some more manageable third downs and maybe correct some of those third down mistakes. Just when I think the positioning when you're in bad spots facing long or medium third downs, just inherently the likelihood of you converting them is not as good. So Pitt's got to be better down to down. It's not necessarily about making plays on third down in particular, but it's about being better play to play on each of those series, getting ready for third down.
Agreed. Set yourself up with winning situations on third down, you'll win more third downs. That's a very simple formula, but it's time proven. I think we've seen it play out, but they do need to pick this up, because you can't do like that. You can't play like that against Clemson. You can't play like that against Louisville. You can't play like that against SMU this upcoming week. So Pitt's got to figure it out. We'll see if they do figure it out on offense. Last question here, and this is kind of a looking back question. Ed on Twitter asks, going into the Syracuse game, did you guys ever think it would be an absolute old-fashioned fanny kicking? I haven't heard old-fashioned fanny kicking, I think, once in my life. But, Steven, you and I gave our predictions. I think we both picked Pitt to win. I picked Pitt to win, I think, by 10. And I think you picked them by like less than a touchdown.
Yeah, I had them winning by just a field goal. I had them winning on a game winner from Ben Sauls at the buzzer. I know our colleague Jerry DePaula from the Trib had them winning by the same margin as well. I expected more of a battle, mostly because Pitt hasn't proven that they've really been able to pull away from anyone who's playing at a higher level than Kent State right now, which might be the worst team in FBS. So I expected a very close game. I did not think it was going to be that bad at all. And I also did not expect, even if they were going to win by a more comfortable margin, that it would be the defense leading the way, quite honestly. I thought the offense would kind of regain form, start hitting on big plays again. No, they didn't even really need the offense at all. I mean, I think if you just kept rolling the Pitt defense out there for series after series, I think Pitt still would have won that game. They wouldn't have needed an offense at all, quite honestly, to win that game.
In my time of watching football, when you give an offense time to figure things out, eventually they figure things out and you become a problem. When you can't keep possess the ball and they do have a whole bunch of snaps in the field, they're going to tire your defense out. Pitt's defense didn't look tired. They were out there making plays left and right, flying all over the place. That to me was the scariest part about this. Did I predict that it would be an old-fashioned fanny kicking, Ed? No. I did predict that they'd win. I thought that was the smart move. And I think right now, the way that they are playing on defense, if the offense can get back to where it was even just a few weeks ago, even a month ago, you combine those two at the same time, and you have a very dangerous Pitt football team at the right time to be dangerous.
Right. Yeah. If these things can click all at the same time, I mean, that's the making of what we were talking about earlier, like a top 15, a top 10, a playoff caliber football team. But it's been pretty rare instances this season when we've seen both of those units clicking at the same time. So the other thing is Pat Narduzzi over the past 3 or 4 years has gotten his teams to play their best ball in November down the stretch of the season, which is kind of a reversal, honestly, of what he's done during his first 5 years or so at Pitt. So we'll see what they're able to put together in the second half. History says they'll be pretty good, but we'll see what they're able to do in a hostile environment down at SMU this week.
And Stephen will be down in SMU this week. You read all of his work, all of my work, all of our work at post-gazette.com here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Thanks again for tuning in for another edition of the Pitt Mailbag Show. We're back next week answering questions, but we'll also have our post-game show at the after the late-night SMU game as Stephen tries to speed his way out of Dallas with his early morning flight after a night game. How crazy do things work here in the ACC. But from Chris Carter and Stephen Thompson, thanks again for tuning into the Pitt Mailbag Show. We'll see you again soon. Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.